Imagine that you are traveling through the desert with your family when suddenly you find yourselves in an area that was used for nuclear testing and ambushed by killer mutants. What would you do? In this video, we will recap and discuss the best decisions to survive the cannibal mutants in The Hills Have Eyes. We start with the fact that the United States conducted various secret nuclear tests between 1945 and 1962. While many of these tests occurred in remote locations, such as in the middle of the ocean or isolated deserts, the effects of radiation extend to the surrounding environment, affecting wildlife and, in some cases, those who were close to these areas. While it is unlikely that anyone would become a cannibal mutant, it is always prudent to avoid radiation-contaminated areas. As for the scientists we encounter in the story, they would certainly have wished to stay away from these areas, as they faced a brutal fate while gathering resources near a desert stream. Having armed guards accompany the scientists would have been a sensible measure to avoid tragedies. We move on to a guy who manages a gas station in the desert, very close to the area where the nuclear tests took place. Judging by the situation with the scientists, it's likely that this individual has some sort of arrangement with the desert dwellers to avoid attacks. However, it seems like he sends random people to become victims of mutants in exchange for their valuables. Given the state of his establishment and his apparent dissatisfaction with this situation, perhaps it would be better for him to abandon the gas station and seek help in the nearest town, informing the police about the mutant threat and letting the authorities handle the situation from there. So, what was about to be a full-blown heist is interrupted by the arrival of the Carter family at the gas station. They stop to refuel and appear to be in the middle of a long journey from Cleveland to San Diego to celebrate Big Bob and Ethel's wedding anniversary. Just imagine, 6 people and a baby crammed into a trailer and a pickup truck, facing a long journey in the relentless desert heat. This must not be anyone's idea of fun, especially considering that the teenagers have no cell signal, making the situation even worse. Maybe Big Bob should have heeded Doug's advice and opted for plane tickets, saving a lot of travel time, or even just gone as a couple, leaving the rest of the family at home or figuring out another solution. But no, Big Bob decides to take a shortcut and veer off the main highway, all in the name of a desert view, and we all know that shortcuts aren't always the best option in situations like this. While the family is distracted, someone takes advantage of the opportunity to sneak a peek inside the car without being noticed. Meanwhile, Bob, the youngest son, decides it's time to relieve himself, much to Brenda's displeasure. He chooses to use the restroom at the back, but let's agree that place doesn't seem like the most hygienic option. Perhaps it would be better to turn around and find a more suitable spot. Bob ignores the dirt and remnants in the restroom but is surprised to realize that someone is watching him. He even thinks it might be his own sister, which raises questions about the kind of relationship these two have. The gas station owner gives some advice to Big Bob, warning him about the long journey ahead. But Big Bob, a former detective accustomed to night patrols, seems confident in driving at night. However, someone with his knowledge should have a decent map to navigate the highways and avoid getting lost in the middle of the desert with the family in tow. Roads like that would hardly have gas stations, other cars, or people to help in case of problems, such as a breakdown due to the desert heat. To make matters worse, one of the family's dogs escapes and enters the old man's convenience store, which is also his home. Lynn, Doug's wife, decides to go after Bella and ends up discovering the suitcase containing the stolen belongings by the old man. The old man notices Lynn's attention to his belongings, and before they leave, he comes up with a suggestion for a new shortcut through the hills, as if the first one didn't work well. Lynn was sitting in the back seat, listening in silence, which doesn't make any sense. She had seen the old man's bag filled with jewelry and items that clearly didn't belong to him. In view of this, it would be expected that she let her father move away from the gas station and, with her experience as a detective's daughter, inform her father about what she saw inside the old man's house. This way, they could continue on the main road and reach the highway, with no reason to follow a second shortcut suggested by the old man. However, they end up choosing a dirt road, towing a trailer, and the trip's fun quickly turns into a nightmare. Shortly after entering the shortcut, the vehicle's tires are punctured in a trap, causing Big Bob to lose control of the pickup truck and crash into a rock. Although there are no injuries in the accident, they are now without a vehicle and lost in the middle of nowhere. Big Bob's plan is for Doug to follow the road to see how far it goes, while he would return to the gas station for help. However, with night approaching, and considering Big Bob's questionable shortcut skills, the distance to the gas station is only 7 miles, which seems manageable enough to camp there and seek help in the morning, as the desert can be treacherous both during the day and at night. At this point, Lynn should start sharing her observations with the family. If everyone examined the accident more closely, they would notice that at least 4 tires were punctured, in addition to the trailer's tires, which may have been damaged in the trap. Combining this evidence with the reflection Lynn spotted earlier, which could very well be someone watching them, it would be logical for Big Bob, as a former detective, to begin suspecting that something more sinister is at play. However, he grabs a revolver and hands a pistol to his son to stand guard while he leaves. But the boy doesn't seem very adept at handling a weapon, as the first thing he does is point it at Doug, and even with the safety on, accidents can happen. And that pistol in the boy's hand seems more dangerous than useful. With a brief prayer, Big Bob and Doug set off in search of help, while the rest of the family discusses the imprudence of making this car trip in the first place. It doesn't take long for another dog to escape, which, according to my calculations, is already the 3rd time one of them has gotten away. Bob rushes desperately after the animal, leaving the pistol on the table. He soon hears a noise coming from the hills. If it were me, I would certainly do anything to find my dog. Bob, on the other hand, spots something and follows a trail of blood. The boy grabs a rock to defend himself, although it wouldn't make much difference if he were attacked. He finds his German Shepherd in a distressing situation, indicating that some evil creature killed it. Bob is shocked by the sight and starts running, ending up falling into a crater, instantly fainting. Ruby, the girl who stole his sweatshirt, appears, and Goggles does too, devouring one of the dog's legs. It seems the dog was killed with a knife, suggesting that this could have been a trap to lure the boy there, a trap that worked very well. At this moment, Bob surely regrets leaving the pistol on the table, and running while constantly looking back in a desert filled with loose rocks seems like a bad idea. Meanwhile, Doug continues his journey through unfamiliar territory, and instead of finding a highway, he comes across what appears to be a vehicle graveyard inside a nuclear crater. There are several craters of this kind that are marked on maps and can be visited in the United States, but of course, nobody in that family knew how to read a map and ended up near one without any idea where they were. Night finally falls, and Big Bob arrives exhausted at the gas station. He looks for the old man but fails to find him. While investigating the area, he stumbles upon the offerings left by the mutants and notices a severed ear. Big Bob goes on high alert and draws his revolver. Furthermore, he finds various articles about the nuclear tests and learns that some mining families did not leave the area during the tests, staying in the mines and absorbing high levels of radiation, passing it on to the next generation. Unfortunately, these people did not gain superpowers but instead became cannibal mutants, collaborating with the gas station old man to make travelers disappear in the area. Realizing this, Big Bob tries to find a functional car to escape but is interrupted by the drunken old man muttering in his shack. When Bob opens the door, the old man shoots himself, and voices in the darkness start screaming, "Daddy," which leads Big Bob to fire his revolver frantically and run to the car. However, he neglects the back seat and is surprised by a mutant who captures him and drags him into the mines. In a situation like this, the wisest course of action would be to keep trying to start the car or look for another one in working condition. Moreover, the way Big Bob fires his revolver 4 times without a clear reason would only make it easier for the mutants to capture him, and the idea of his son handling a weapon is concerning, considering his father's behavior. Back in the trailer, the girls are searching for Bob, while the boy remains unconscious in the hole, which seems strange since a fainting spell usually doesn't last more than a few minutes. Fortunately, Ruby only observes the boy, and Goggles seems to prefer animals to humans. Brenda finally finds Bob, and Ethel tends to the boy's injuries. He asks if the girls tried to use the radio, but they mention only hearing someone's breathing on the other end, which raises suspicions. It doesn't take long for the boy to hear something and go out to check, discovering that the other dog has also escaped. Doug returns with some findings and mentions the crater he found. However, Bob decides not to share information about the dog that was killed and the likely killers roaming the desert. Doug also doesn't seem very sharp since he finds several abandoned cars with bloodstains in the middle of nowhere and doesn't suspect anything. There were even trailers and a boat on site. Later, Bob tries to convince everyone to sleep together, but Doug insists on having some privacy. However, the boy can't sleep and hears barking, seemingly not having learned from the previous events. After falling into a trap in that crater, Bob ignores the signs and decides to look for the dog, not alerting anyone about what happened. He grabs the pistol and leaves the trailer door open. When the boy finally realizes it's a trap and tries to alert the rest of the family, it's too late. One of the mutants enters the trailer, and before they can react, a fire breaks out. with Big Bob at the center of the flames. The family rushes toward the detective, and while Doug grabs the trailer's fire extinguisher and rushes out, the mutants wreak havoc inside the vehicle, traumatizing Brenda. Lynn hears the screams and rushes to help Brenda but ends up being taken hostage by the mutant, and Ethel notices the situation and advances with a rock but is struck by the mutant. Determined, Lynn grabs a screwdriver and tries to pierce the mutant's leg but is brutally finished by him. After this terrible episode, the mutants flee with the baby, leaving only Brenda alive as the ammunition runs out at that crucial moment. Certainly, Bob made a mistake by not sharing his findings with the family and going out alone at night to look for the dog. The fact that Doug entered the trailer in search of the fire extinguisher without noticing the presence of the giant mutant raises questions about his field of vision. We understand that adrenaline was high, but in such a confined space, it would be difficult not to notice the presence of a giant figure out of the corner of your eye and suspect that something was wrong. Furthermore, the fire extinguisher probably wouldn't have been enough to put out the flames engulfing Big Bob, suggesting that it was being used as a distraction by the mutants to allow them to capture the rest of the family or finish them off. The mutants seem to have no intention of leaving anyone alive, as one of them threatened to come back and finish Brenda later. Doug should have hurried to the trailer with the girls and tried to be more helpful. As for Lynn's attempt, it could have been more effective if she had attacked a different vulnerable point instead of the mutant's leg, as her action only agitated him further. Instead of running into the middle of the desert as Bob did, he could have gone to the trailer where the mutants were and avoided shooting from a distance, as ammunition was likely limited. Doug enters the trailer and finds Lynn dead, discovering that the baby was taken, and one of the dogs is still alive and attacks one of the mutants. Back with the family, Bob wants to go out and confront the mutants, but Doug stops him, arguing that they don't know how many mutants are out there. They hear a noise outside, and Bob fires 3 shots aimlessly, hitting nothing. Doug investigates and finds an arm with a radio, which was probably brought by the dog, who apparently is smarter than all of them. He tries to communicate through the radio, questioning the mutants about their intentions regarding the baby, which doesn't really make much sense. If you come into possession of an enemy's radio, the most sensible course of action is not to immediately reveal that you found the radio. The most effective strategy would be to wait for communication from the mutants to understand their future plans and prepare an ambush, taking advantage of the presence of the dog as an early warning of the mutants' approach. With 1.5 cartridges of ammunition available, as long as Bob wasn't the shooter, they might have a chance to defend themselves. In the morning, Doug decides to go alone with the dog in search of the mutants, leaving Bob and Brenda in the trailer. However, the decision to leave them alone can be risky, considering the risk of being captured by the mutants. Even with Brenda shaken by the traumatic experience, the group should stay together, accompanied by the dog, to locate the mutants. Before embarking on the rescue mission, they could also try to climb a mountain to improve the range of the radio communicator and attempt to communicate on a different frequency, although it's a long shot to find someone willing to help. While Doug explores the dark mine with only a flashlight, following a trail of blood, he doesn't encounter mutants but rather miners' graves and some pickaxes that could serve as weapons. However, he chooses not to use them and exits the mine, arriving at a small abandoned town that was used for nuclear tests. He tries to communicate with Bob and Brenda through the radio, but neither of them is nearby, rendering the communication method ineffective due to their inattention. In the test town, Doug decides to explore the area without information about the location or quantity of mutants present, leaving himself vulnerable to a possible surprise attack. Fortunately, he finds the only house with a functioning generator and discovers the presence of the baby, but also realizes that a giant mutant is roaming the town with a shotgun. Doug leaves the dog in an abandoned car and tries to sneak into the house, but he encounters a mutant inside. He attempts to escape with the baby, but the attempt is unsuccessful. It seems that Doug is not familiar with spy movies because his approach in the town makes it easy for anyone to find him, and he probably regrets leaving the pistol with Bob. Luckily, Doug escaped the situation unharmed and was left in some kind of freezer with a brittle plastic door, which allowed his escape. Coincidentally, his baseball bat was nearby. After freeing himself, Doug explored the house and came across the remains of Big Bob and a mutant immobilized in a chair. The mutant expressed his discontent with the fact that they had destroyed their homes with nuclear bombs and turned them into mutants. Doug tried to threaten the mutant to find out the whereabouts of his baby, but then Pluto arrived, breaking through a door to attack him. The young man had no chance against the mutant, but luckily the dog showed up to save him. Instead of helping the dog confront the mutant, Doug fled to the bathroom and blocked the door with a bathtub. as if that would stop the mutant, who had easily passed through a door before. Pluto tried to attack him again, but Doug finally managed to hit him. However, instead of continuing to fight, he just watched. The mutant eventually got bored and started playing with him, but Doug grabbed a tool and drove it into the mutant's foot, finishing Pluto off with an American flag and an axe. After that, Doug easily eliminated the mutant with a shotgun, while the dog took care of the mutant in the chair. Armed with the shotgun, he set out to find his daughter. However, the immobilized mutant had already given orders to finish her. Meanwhile, Brenda tried to create smoke using a tire to attract someone's attention, while Bob set up a trap with a fishing line Doug found in the car graveyard to detect movement around the camp. The trap was activated when they were moving their mother and sister's bodies to the pickup truck. The siblings rushed to check the line and realized it was just a plant hitting the wire. This moment of distraction was enough for a mutant to grab their mother's body. Burning a tire at that moment would only make them easier to locate by the cannibals, while the fishing line was a useful tool. Bob could have separated the segments of the line or placed objects at regular intervals, like hands, to determine the exact location where the trap was triggered. Furthermore, keeping his sister on top of the trailer would have provided a wider view and prevented such a mishap. When they returned to the camp, they noticed their mother's body had disappeared, and one of the mutants had taken it as a snack. Bob began shooting and running at the same time, wasting ammunition and missing all shots. He lured the mutant to the trailer, where Brenda was preparing a trap with gas canisters. The mutant managed to grab Brenda through the window, but somehow, Bob managed to tie his hands before escaping with Brenda through another window. When the mutant managed to free himself, he opened the door, which ignited some matches, causing a large explosion. This kind of plan is extremely risky and unlikely to work in real life, so don't attempt it to survive mutants. Bob's ability to tie up the mutant through the window and the matches lighting perfectly on the first try were pure luck. In reality, the first attempt often breaks the match, and it would have been much wiser for Bob to simply stand still when the mutant was chasing him and finish him off with a shot. Meanwhile, Doug was struggling to find the baby, as Ruby had exchanged her for a piglet to prevent the mutant from finishing her off. He began pursuing the girl and caught up to her, but he was pursued by the mutant, who knocked him out. Ruby fled with the baby, but the mutant followed her, leaving the shotgun behind. Doug recovered and after a brief confrontation, managed to shoot the mutant. However, the monster was not dead and picked up the shotgun to finish Doug. At this moment, Ruby realized the danger and threw herself off the mountain, taking the mutant with her. Leaving the shotgun next to the mutant's body was a critical mistake by Doug, as it is very likely that other mutants are still alive, and the weapon would be crucial for their future defense. Back at the camp, the mutant did not die in the explosion, and Brenda decided to finish him off with her own hands using a pickaxe. We finish with Doug returning with the baby and the dog, while someone watches them with binoculars. Now, they will have to walk for a long time to reach the gas station in search of water and a vehicle to leave the area. During this journey, it would be prudent for Doug to still have the shotgun, as they do not know how many mutants are in the town. There's a good chance that there are more mutants than those previously shown, as they were being observed by someone. Another riskier option could be to return to Mutant Town and search for the truck that was seen at the beginning dragging the scientists, which could make the survivors escape easier. And this family would have had a better chance of survival if they hadn't been so economical in choosing to travel by car to California, or at least if they hadn't chosen to take a shortcut through the hills. Furthermore, if Lynn had alerted Big Bob about the suspicious belongings of the gas station attendant, it could have raised suspicion in him, giving him a better opportunity to avoid the shortcut and escape the mutant's trap. It's also important to mention that the disappearance of the scientists at the beginning of the story could have raised suspicions that something sinister was happening in that part of the desert, leading the government to send agents to investigate the area. They would have had more resources and training to confront the mutants, possibly capturing or neutralizing the cannibals. Hey guys, this was like surviving the mutants in the hills have eyes, and if you believe you would succeed in surviving, share in the comments what you would do differently, and thank you very much for watching. And if you're planning a long trip, remember to be cautious when choosing shortcuts, as it could be your last journey.